It's a great pleasure to welcome you all to Kigali, which we very well describe as Murakazaneza, Rwanda, Wemisozi Igiumbi. In English, it just means the country of 1,000 hills. And it's not only a country of 1,000 hills, it's a country of 1,000 smiles and 1,000 lessons to learn from. So welcome to the 11th BIOFIN Africa and Arab States Regional Dialogue. To illustrate the spirit of unity and diversity that defines our continent in this gathering today, I'm going to try to, at a representative way of greeting the audience. Simply, we're in Rwanda, it's Muramutse. I'm sure I will not miss this if I say bonjour, good morning, buongiorno. Most importantly, for those of us in East Africa, we will say habari za asubuhi. But there's something very interesting lesson about Swahili. They say Swahili is born in Tanzania, meaning Tanzanians still speak the original Swahili. It grew up in Kenya. So you know, as you grow up, you pick up different things. So I think the version of Swahili in Kenya has a bit of a mixture. And they say it died in Uganda. Ugandans no longer speak Swahili. But anyway, we still remember what habari za asubuhi is. For our colleagues from the Arab region, we can say Sabarker. And the Zulu, if they could represent the Southern African part, I'll use the shorter form of Mulu. Zambia is aware of Mwabuka Buti. But ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, whether you say for welcome Karibu, Bienvenue, welcome Murakazaneza, or Alan Wasalan, we are truly honored to have you all here today in Rwanda. Distinguished guests, government representatives, BIOFIN country teams, development partners, and colleagues, allow me to extend special thanks and appreciation to the government of Rwanda and BIOFIN Global Team. Particularly, I want to mention some names. And I'll say Mukoro Wanji, Wakubawa, Dr. Valentine Wamaria, that's my sister, the Honorable Minister of Environment. And we want to recognize your sterling leadership and vision in championing biodiversity finance in Rwanda. And this is simple because it's going to be Muromuna Wanji. Rwanda distinguishes between older sister and younger sister. Muromuna Wanji, Ms. Juliet Kabera, Director General of the Rwanda Environment Management Authority, for your unwavering commitment to environmental stewardship. To my colleague, Mr. Martin Cadena, BIOFIN Global Program Manager, for your dedication to advancing biodiversity finance globally and for joining us here in Kigali. And most importantly, for the partnership in hosting this important event here in Rwanda. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to use an analogy that I believe is really going to contextualize the discussion we're going to have here for the next 3 days. I'm sure most people who work on BIOFIN must have done biology. Let me take a disclaimer, I'm an economist, so don't take my mistakes to heart. But we very well know about symbiosis when we study biology, symbiotic relationships. And I'll give a bit of examples. When nitrogen-fixing bacteria are found in the root modules of some plants, we see that the bacteria provides nitrogen for the plants, while the plant provides habitat and nutrients for the bacteria. They both need each other to survive. If you uproot the plants, the bacteria does not have habitat anymore. It may die. Without the bacteria, the plant does not get the nitrogen. 3 characteristics I want us to remember from this symbiotic relationship. One is it involves an interaction between the 2 organisms, between the living plants, the living things. It's a physical close proximity is required. Second, it denotes mutually beneficial relationship. I say mutually because biology defines 3 kinds of relationship. There's one that is mutual, one unaffected, and another that is more parasitic. But I think I want us to stay with me on the mutual beneficial characteristics of symbiosis. Third element is it requires a close and long-term interaction between the two different species. Other examples to put this into context some more is bees pollinating flowers. The bees get nectar, and the flower gets pollinated. This is exactly the context that we should be discussing when we're talking about nature and finance. There has to be a close relationship between the two, and it has to be beneficial both ways. And we find ourselves human in the middle of it. We know the reality that biodiversity is critical, provides critical infrastructure for our economies. Also, the natural ecosystem provides the foundation for food system, water supply, etc. Our economies and resources, that is our budgets that we generate, should definitely reflect this reality. And I think that's why we are here today, to discuss that in that context. So, brings me to the point around the urgency of biodiversity finance. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to start with some stark figures. And this is not to scare us, but rather to motivate us and stimulate some really interesting discussions we're going to have for the next 2 days. We are not saying this to cause panic, but we want to provide the reality of what we are facing and how that should trigger us into concrete actions coming from this workshop. While biodiversity remains the foundation of our economies, health, and climate resilience, as I mentioned earlier on, we are facing unprecedented crisis with over 1 million species that are said to be at risk of extinction. Secondly, the global biodiversity finance gap is estimated at $700 billion annually. Despite this, we know that only about 121 billion is currently spent each year on biodiversity conservation. Do the math. We need 700 billion every year. We are only at 121 billion every year, far from what we really need to sustain our ecosystem that is actually the bedrock of our very existence. And I want to use the example here in Rwanda, where annual public spending on biodiversity has averaged just about $10 million, but most importantly, that is still less than 1% of the national budget. And we know it's a country that is rich in ecosystems, and growing environmental pressures also exist here. This underscores the urgent need for innovative finance mechanisms to bridge and protect Rwanda's natural capital. But I'm happy to also share that through BIOFIN, UNDP is working closely with the government by helping countries such as Rwanda to develop and implement biodiversity finance plans that are aligned with public and private finance and national biodiversity goals. But also, many countries are using BIOFIN methodologies to unlock finance through green bonds, biodiversity credits, digital payment platforms, and the repurposing of harmful subsidies. Now, just after saying that about Rwanda, I really want to be able to contextualize the progress we have seen made here. And this reminds me again about a dialogue between an old man taking a walk in the forest, and the man hears the voice saying, "Pick me up." He was expecting to be the only one in the forest. Here's "pick me up." He looks around. What he sees is a frog. And then he says, "Are you speaking to me?" The frog says, "Yes. Pick me up and kiss me. I'll turn into a beautiful bride." The old man picks the frog up, puts it in his pocket. The frog says, no, that's not the deal. I said, pick me up and kiss me. I'll turn into a beautiful bride. The old man says, at my age, I'd rather have a talking frog than a beautiful bride. So it's important to know what you want in life, and I think that's what Rwanda does. Rwanda is pioneering a new model of biodiversity finance through digital innovation. They've launched the IremboPay, a platform that digitizes the issuance and tracking of environmental fines. The country is transforming enforcement into ecological restoration. I have to say again proudly that the IREMBO system for environmental fees and fines that it's been operational since October 2024, it ensures that fines collected for environmental violations could be reinvested into conservation efforts such as reforestation, wetland restoration, and environmental education. It's creating a transparent and accountable loop between damage and repair. Rwanda's approach, supported by REMA and BIOFIN, aligns with the global diversity goals by integrating finance into national systems and reducing reliance on foreign aid. And I'm happy my sister Juliet mentions this. We are happy to have foreign aid, but we really want to build our systems to be sure we can really do this by ourselves because we recognize the importance of biodiversity for our economies. It's a visionary step towards sustainable, nature-positive development and a model for other nations facing biodiversity finance gap to learn from. And I'm sure in the course of the 3 days, you have a lot of opportunity to do that. I have to recall that at the 6th BIOFIN conference in Chile, representatives from over 130 countries reaffirmed their commitment to the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, and this signaled a clear collective drive to embed biodiversity finance into national budgets and private sector portfolios worldwide. But at this conference, we really have to take planning to implementation, because this year's theme, from studies and planning to implementation, it is timely and urgent. Many of you have completed your biodiversity finance plans, and now is the time to turn those plans into action, into investment-ready pipelines that attract real financing. This dialogue here in Rwanda is designed to help us all to do just that through peer learning, masterclasses, and direct engagement with financial partners. And I want to say that in this journey, UNDP is not a bystander, because our overall mandate that anchors on poverty reduction, and knowing very well that most of the world's poor in many of our countries depend on the natural environment, we cannot afford not to be major players. So that's why, on behalf of my colleague, we remain deeply committed to supporting countries in this journey from diagnostics to delivery. Through BIOFIN, the Nature Pledge, and our broader climate and nature portfolio, we are working closely with countries to integrate biodiversity into national planning, budgeting, and economic policy. We are also proud to support innovative mechanisms such as biodiversity credits, green bonds, and digital finance solutions. So as I come to a close, I'm going to leave you with this. When this man who has studied in the city decided for his parents to come and visit him, and he welcomed them because he thought his parents had never been to the city, taking them from one building to the other. Of course, they were admiring the tall buildings, the numerous cars on the streets, and then they go into the university building itself, and they had a fascination with the silver magic box. These old people came out of the silver magic box. You would call it today an elevator. And the old man was standing there and just couldn't leave. And at some point, he saw an old woman carrying a walking stick enter the silver magic box. It opened, the old woman gets in, it closes. The next minute, while he's still standing and gazing, the magic box opens and a young, well-looking, dressed woman comes out of the box. The guy, in his perplexion, calls the son to say, "Call your mother. Let's put her in the box." Change doesn't happen that easily. It takes time for change. We wish we can all get into an elevator and come out looking really young and smart. But it doesn't happen that easily. So I think the admonishment is, let's build and invest on the time that is required for ministries of finance to understand our language. Let us dialogue. Let's use this dialogue as a space for bold ideas, practical solutions, and new partnerships. Let us move together from ambition to action, from planning to financing, and from dialogue to delivery. Let me wish you all a productive and inspiring 3 days. Murakoze Chane, thank you very much.